Hello, everyone. Today, we are stepping into a story that begins not with thunder or trumpets, but with dusty footsteps along a winding road. You're my brother, but I've never seen you eat. That puzzled cry came from a young traveler centuries ago, one who didn't realize he was walking beside an angel. Have you ever trusted someone who later turned out to be more than they seemed? What if they weren't just a good person, but divine? A boy named Tobias set out on a journey. He carried more than provisions. He carried his father's trust, his family's hope, and a secret he didn't yet know. The road ahead twisted like the river it followed, but someone waited to join him. Someone who looked like a man, spoke like a friend, and walked with purpose. This is where Raphael enters, not descending from the heavens with flaming swords or thundering pronouncements. He comes in disguise, quiet, humble, a fellow traveler. In the Book of Tobit, we meet him as Azarias, the son of Ananias the Great, a name invented for the mission. No wings, no halo, just dusty feet and loyal company. Tobias, the young man, had been sent by his blind father, Tobit, to retrieve a sum of silver left in a distant city. Tobit, once wealthy, had become poor and blind after a mysterious accident involving bird droppings of all things. His suffering was both physical and spiritual. He had spent his life doing good, burying the dead, giving to the poor, and still he had lost everything. He cried out to God not just in despair, but with a wish for death. A mirror prayer echoed from another city, where Sarah, tormented by a demon who had killed 7 of her betrothed, prayed the same, and heaven heard them both. God, in his mysterious kindness, didn't send fire. He sent Raphael. And Raphael did what angels often do. He slipped into human skin and walked alongside the broken. He introduced himself to Tobias, offered to guide him, and they set off together like old friends. Tobias didn't suspect a thing. There was no divine glow, no echo of wings, just conversation, laughter, and trust. What made Raphael so beloved was not merely his divine origin, it was his nearness, his ability to appear in the ordinary. He shared Tobias's meals, slept beside the campfire, and gave wise advice. There was a moment by the river when Tobias caught a large fish. Raphael told him to keep its heart, liver, and gall. Strange advice from a stranger, but it would make all the difference later. Night by night, the angel walked beside the young man and taught him things that weren't about gold or errands. They were about courage, love, healing, about trusting in what cannot be seen. Raphael was on a mission with layers. He wasn't just guiding Tobias. He was setting the stage for a miracle that would change two families forever. And in the process, he showed us something essential about why people love him so deeply. Raphael is the angel of the long road, the one who stays beside you even when you're afraid. He doesn't overwhelm you with his glory. He keeps pace. When they arrived in Ecbatana, the city of the silver, Tobias met Sarah, the same Sarah, whose life had been shattered by a demon named Asmodeus. Her pain was quiet and deep. Each wedding she entered had ended in death. People whispered behind her back, avoided her eyes. But Tobias looked at her differently. He fell in love with her, and Raphael, still in disguise, encouraged the match. Here again, he showed a part of his nature that earns him human affection. He's not just a healer of the body. He restores what's been broken by shame, grief, and fear, what's more human than needing companionship, than hoping love won't lead to pain. Tobias agreed to marry Sarah, and Raphael gave him strange instructions for the wedding night: burn the fish's heart and liver as incense. Tobias obeyed, and when the demon came as it had before, it was driven away, fled in smoke and fear. Raphael, unseen, chased it all the way to the deserts of Egypt and bound it there. The angel didn't just counsel and comfort. He battled all this, and still Tobias had no idea who his companion truly was. They returned home with the silver and with a bride. Tobit, still blind, greeted them joyfully. But the real gift came next. Remember that fish gall. At Raphael's prompting, Tobias applied it to his father's eyes. The blindness lifted. Sight returned. After years of darkness, Tobit saw his son, his new daughter-in-law, and the sunlight again. That's when Raphael revealed himself. He didn't do it for glory. He waited until everything was complete, until love had bloomed, healing had come, and the journey was over. Then he said, "I am Raphael, one of the 7 who stand before the Lord." Can you imagine that moment? The man you thought was just a helpful stranger tells you he's one of the highest-ranking angels in heaven, that every step, every word, every miracle was part of a divine mission. And then he left. No fanfare, no monument. He ascended quietly, as he had come, but something had changed. Not just in Tobit or Tobias. Something had shifted in how people understood God's nearness. For in Raphael, they saw that angels didn't have to shout. They could walk beside you. They could be kind. They could listen. And when needed, they could fight for you. To this day, people call on Raphael when the road is long and uncertain, when the destination is unclear or the heart is heavy. Because of this story, because of how he chose to show up not in power, but in presence, Raphael became beloved, and we've only just started to uncover the depths of why. Tobit blinked at the sun for the first time in years. His world, once wrapped in shadow, now burned with color. The face of his son, older now, and the delicate features of Sarah, his new daughter-in-law, stood before him. And behind them, slightly apart, stood Raphael, no longer just a traveling companion, but a being of radiance, his true nature finally revealed. "I am Raphael," he had said, "one of the 7 angels who stand and enter before the glory of the Lord," and then he was gone. But the miracles he left behind lingered like perfume in a quiet room. They were not merely symbolic gestures. They had changed real lives, broken curses, restored hope. 2 lives had been healed, one tormented by a demon, the other by blindness. And both had been touched by divine mercy flowing through Raphael's presence. But what exactly had he done? Let's rewind a little. When Raphael first met Tobias, he had already known what needed to be done. Tobias wasn't just on a journey to retrieve silver. He was a key to 2 miracles, both of which Raphael orchestrated with care, precision, and quiet compassion. The first was a physical healing. Tobit's blindness, caused by a seemingly laughable yet tragic incident, bird droppings falling into his eyes while he slept, was emblematic of the cruelty of fate. A man of great righteousness, who risked his life to bury the dead and care for the needy, struck down not by sin or violence, but by random misfortune. It made his suffering feel unjust. Raphael's healing of Tobit was more than a medical fix. It was a divine declaration. You are not forgotten. He told Tobias to rub the gall of the fish on his father's eyes. A strange remedy, perhaps, but one drawn from a mysterious well of ancient knowledge. As the gall was applied, a white film peeled from Tobit's eyes, and light flooded in. It was not just sight that returned, it was dignity, joy, and the ability to once again bless with full awareness. But that was only the beginning. The second miracle was something darker, stranger, a confrontation with a demon named Asmodeus, whose obsession with Sarah had turned her life into a tragedy. Sarah was betrothed 7 times, and each time Her husband was struck down before the marriage could be consummated. Fear clung to her like a second skin. People whispered that she was cursed. She began to believe it herself. Sarah had prayed in silence, asking God to take her life if this pain would never end. That prayer, too, had reached heaven, and heaven responded. When Raphael told Tobias to burn the fish's heart and liver in their bridal chamber, it wasn't folklore. It was strategy. Asmodeus, the demon of lust and destruction, could not stand the smell. When Tobias lit the fire, the demon fled, enraged and weakened. Raphael pursued him across deserts unrelenting. He chased him to Egypt and bound him there, not destroyed, but chained. It's a curious detail, isn't it? Raphael didn't annihilate Asmodeus. He subdued him. It echoes something deeper, perhaps, that evil, for now, is restrained but still present in the world. It's not eradicated, but it can be overpowered when heaven intervenes, and so we see the duality of Raphael's role, both healer and warrior. He restores what is broken and drives out what is wicked. It's this dual action, sight and safety, love and liberation, that cements Raphael's place in the hearts of believers. He's not only a protector in the abstract. He intervenes in the most intimate, desperate moments, a wedding night haunted by fear, a father groping blindly through darkness, and still, what made it extraordinary was how quietly it all unfolded. Raphael didn't demand worship. He didn't reveal his identity until the work was complete. And even then, he gave the glory to God. Bless God and give him thanks in the presence of all the living for the good things he has done for you. It is good to keep the secret of a king, but glorious to reveal the works of God. This moment, his only speech, as Raphael, is brief, but powerful. It's a theology wrapped in humility, a reminder that true service doesn't seek recognition. Raphael worked in secret, not for applause, but for love. That love, disguised, present, persistent, is what humans respond to. It's what makes him beloved. There's also a deep psychological resonance in the demon story. Sarah's suffering 7 fiancés dead is unspeakably painful, and the fear that she was cursed touches a universal wound, that perhaps our suffering means we are unworthy of love. Raphael's intervention disproves that. He doesn't just bind the demon, he restores Sarah's hope. He brings love into her life again. He makes the impossible safe, and isn't that the heart of what healing means? Not merely restoring what was lost, but making space for joy again. Even the way Raphael handles Tobias and Sarah is gentle. He doesn't command or control. He guides. He offers wisdom. He encourages, listens, walks beside. He never steals the spotlight. In this, he becomes a model for how divine help often arrives not in spectacle, but in stillness. Not through overwhelming power, but through faithful presence. The Book of Tobit ends with a sense of wholeness. Raphael disappears, but the people he touched continue on, changed forever. Tobias inherits his father's house. Sarah finds peace. Tobit lives long enough to see grandchildren and teaches them to walk in righteousness. Everything that was broken has been mended. And yet, the ripple effects of those miracles continued. People remembered the angel who had once walked among them. They passed down his name. They prayed to him on journeys. They asked his help when their own vision, physical or spiritual, failed them. Raphael had stepped into their lives like a breath of wind through a closed room. He was gone in a flash, but the air felt fresher ever after. That's why the story didn't end with Tobit. It found its way into the prayers of sailors facing stormy seas, the whisper of mothers watching over sick children, the silent hope of lovers wondering if their love would be safe, because once you know that someone like Raphael exists, an angel who walks beside you, drives out demons, and heals with simple touch you never forget, and you begin to see him everywhere. Centuries passed, yet Raphael never disappeared. Though his story is confined to the Book of Tobit, the echoes of his presence have rung through time like a soft bell that never fully fades. The church, the faithful, and mystics all clung to his name not just because of the miracles he performed, but because of what he represented, a bridge between suffering and hope. But here's the astonishing thing. You might not know this Raphael is one of only 3 angels named in the Bible. The other 2, Gabriel, the messenger of the Incarnation, and Michael, the warrior of heaven. Gabriel announced salvation. Michael fought evil. But Raphael walked with the broken, and it's that role intimate, tender, and fiercely present that captured hearts in a way unique to him. As early Christianity developed, the early church fathers began to explore the roles of angels more deeply. While Raphael's name doesn't appear in the canonical New Testament texts, his legacy lived in the prayers and imaginations of the faithful. The Greek word Rapha means to heal, and El means God, so his name itself, Raphael, means God heals. He became known not just as the healing angel, but as the healing of God embodied. And so, from the shadows of Tobit's home, Raphael quietly entered Christian consciousness. By the 4th century, we begin to see Raphael invoked in writings, art, and especially liturgy. People in need of healing, whether from physical ailments, demonic oppression, or emotional despair, called upon his name. There's no record of a major revelation or dogmatic decree at first. Rather, devotion to Raphael spread like wildflowers, quietly, organically, responding to deep human need. One of the earliest testimonies to his growing reverence came from the Eastern churches, where he was often paired with Michael and Gabriel in prayers. Together, they represented the 3 great angelic powers: warfare, proclamation, and healing. But Raphael's ministry was different. Where Michael appeared in visions of fire and judgment, and Gabriel in moments of overwhelming awe, Raphael came softly. He was the angel who did not merely descend from heaven, but entered homes, sat beside beds, touched the eyes of the blind. He became the patron of travelers, doctors, nurses, and lovers. Think of that, what other angel covers such an emotional range? And then came something miraculous in the earthly sense, the rise of shrines dedicated to him. The most famous of these appeared in the Italian town of Rhoda. In the 16th century, a terrible plague struck the city. People were dying in droves. Despair hovered like smoke in the streets. And yet, there was one man who reported visions, repeated encounters with an angel who identified himself as Raphael. That man was Father Ander S. de Los Robles, a priest who claimed the archangel appeared to him in dreams and daylight, promising protection for the city if they built a shrine in his honor. The people, desperate for relief, listened. They built. They prayed, and the plague stopped. Today, if you visit Rhoda, you'll find a statue of Raphael high above the city. Locals still bring flowers, light candles, and ask for healing. The memory remains not as a distant myth, but as lived devotion. The Western Church eventually formalized Raphael's status. In 1921, Pope Benedict XVI included him in the general Roman calendar, with his feast celebrated on September 29th, alongside Michael and Gabriel. But long before the Vatican formalized it, Raphael was already cherished. But why? What makes his story tucked away in a lesser-known book so enduring? Because Raphael fills a particular void in the human spirit. Michael inspires awe. Gabriel invites wonder. But Raphael, he invites trust. Imagine you're a medieval pilgrim, walking barefoot to a distant holy site. Your feet blister. Your eyes squint against the dust. You have no maps, only faith. Who do you pray to? Raphael. Or imagine you're a 17th century physician treating plague victims without understanding what causes the disease. Who do you beg to guide your hands? Raphael. Or today, maybe you're in a hospital, sitting beside a loved one. The machines beep, time crawls, and you don't know what tomorrow holds. Who do you ask to stay with you in the silence? Raphael. He's the one who stays. That's what people say in their hearts, even if they don't speak it aloud. Raphael is the angel who doesn't leave when the lights go dim, and that feeling that his presence lingers in moments of sorrow or hope is what deepens devotion. There's another layer to his appeal, one not often discussed, but deeply felt. Raphael never judges. Tobit's complaints, Sarah's depression, Tobias's uncertainty, Raphael never rebukes them. He listens. He offers wisdom gently. He suggests, encourages, guides. This patient, non-judgmental presence offers a template for divine love that is not authoritarian but relational. People crave that kind of nearness, especially when life is overwhelming. Over the centuries, artists tried to capture his essence, not with fire or battle armor, but with soft robes, walking staffs, and expressions of peace. In most paintings, he's shown leading Tobias by the hand, sometimes with a small dog trotting beside them, a symbol of loyalty and companionship. That's how people wanted to see him, not hovering in majesty, but walking beside them on the road. That's how he is remembered, a presence in the in-between spaces, the road, the riverbank, the threshold of a wedding chamber, the quiet moment before dawn when someone prays and doesn't know if they're being heard. Raphael is the whisper in that silence. Even saints and mystics have testified to his presence. St. John of God, the patron saint of hospitals, is said to have received guidance from Raphael. And in modern times, devotion to Raphael has found its way into healing ministries, counseling sessions, and even addiction recovery circles, because the need for healing real, soul-deep healing hasn't lessened. If anything, it has grown. And Raphael, the angel who once bound a demon and lifted a veil from blind eyes, remains the symbol of that hope, not by shouting ... by walking beside us. Still, the image of an angel walking beside you step by step, no wings flapping in grandeur, no lightning from the sky changes how you understand the divine. For centuries, believers found this quiet intimacy in Raphael. And over time, his role wasn't just understood as a healer of bodies, but of souls. But what does it mean to heal a soul? To answer that, we need to go deeper than medicine. We need to look at how wounds form not just in the flesh, but in the spirit. And here's where Raphael shines most, because not all suffering is visible. Not all demons are named Asmodeus. Sometimes the demon is shame, or addiction, or loneliness, a private anguish hidden behind smiles and polite replies. Sometimes the blindness is not in the eyes but in the heart, an inability to feel loved, to believe one's life has value. And while medicine can numb pain, it can't stitch together a soul that's unraveling, but Raphael can. The Church across centuries began to understand this. In liturgical traditions, Raphael's intercession began to be invoked not just for the physically ill, but for those suffering despair, mental affliction, or spiritual confusion. Confessors would recommend prayers to him for those facing emotional torment. Monasteries dedicated to healing made him their patron. Some even claimed that he was present during the sacrament of reconciliation, especially when a penitent soul arrived broken, unsure whether forgiveness was truly possible. And why not? After all, Raphael had seen Sarah at her lowest when she begged God to end her life. He had walked beside Tobias, who feared a marriage cursed by death. And he had stood beside Tobit, a man who had done everything right and still ended up blind and poor. Raphael knew sorrow, not as an outsider, but as a companion, and because of that, he became a symbol of inner restoration. There's a lesser-known part of Raphael's legend, one not found in Scripture, but cherished in oral tradition. It's said that Raphael doesn't just walk with those who are suffering, he whispers to them. That his voice comes not with command, but with encouragement. Keep going. He says, you are not alone. It's a sacred kind of healing. The kind that doesn't erase scars, but teaches you to love them. In more modern centuries, this concept matured into something even deeper. With the rise of psychology, the Catholic Church began engaging more openly with mental health, depression, trauma. And guess whose name kept reappearing? Raphael. He became the unofficial patron of therapists, counselors, those trying to mend broken emotions and shattered identities. He represented the belief that healing isn't just about cure, it's about integration, about bringing the fragmented pieces of self back into one whole. A woman named Teresa, who lived in Italy during the 1800s, wrote in her journal after surviving a suicide attempt that it was the angel Raphael who held my hands. She had no vision, no mystical experience, just a sudden stillness at the moment when everything in her mind screamed for death. She put the bottle of poison away. Later, she learned his story. She said it was like reading the script of my own rescue. Raphael had become to her not just an angel from an old book, but a living presence, and she was not alone. The phenomenon grew. In World War I, field chaplains carried medals of Raphael to the front lines, not just to pray for the wounded, but for the terrified, for the shell-shocked, for those whose minds broke before their bodies did. There are records of priests whispering, "Raphael is with you," into the ears of young soldiers before battle, just to give them strength. It's this emotional relevance, this timeless empathy, that distinguishes Raphael from other heavenly beings. Michael fights the devil. Gabriel speaks for God. But Raphael heals the broken. He binds wounds, sits beside grief, walks the long journey of recovery, and that's not just theological. It's profoundly human. Because real healing takes time. It's not always instant. Not every story ends with sight restored or demons chased away. Sometimes the miracle is simply that we're still here, that we didn't give up. And for that quiet endurance, for that gentle grace that keeps us moving forward, people have always looked to Raphael. Artists began to depict him differently over the centuries. Earlier icons showed him in regal robes, with golden wings and stately poise. But by the Renaissance, his form softened. Painters like Bartolomé Esteban Murillo and Pietro Perugino portrayed him walking with Tobias as a young man himself, not much older than the boy he guided. Almost like an older brother. That's how people wanted to see him. Not distant, not glowing with power, but familiar, kind. In Raphael, they found something many could not even name, the holiness of companionship. It's a quiet theology, one not taught in catechisms, but known in the soul. That sometimes the divine doesn't descend in lightning. It walks beside us with patience. It listens. It holds space for grief. It doesn't rush the process, and this kind of angelic presence, this sacred accompaniment, is exactly what our modern world aches for. Because we live in a world of invisible wounds. Loneliness has become an epidemic. Despair creeps in through glowing screens and sleepless nights. And for many, faith itself feels like a distant shore. But then, a name rises in prayer. Raphael, a hand outstretched in the dark, a quiet voice saying, "You are still loved." That is why his popularity has not faded. That is why his intercession still brings comfort. Because no matter how much the world changes, the need to be healed, to be known, and carried through suffering remains the same. And Raphael, from the story of Tobit to the cry of a weary soul today, is still answering, still walking, still healing. Raphael's story may begin in ancient scripture, but his footprints are found everywhere, in whispered prayers, in sickbeds, in long nights of uncertainty. And strangely, some of the most moving moments of his legacy aren't in cathedrals or paintings, but in deeply personal encounters. Little moments when someone, amid pain or confusion, senses that they are not alone. They can't explain it, but something or someone was with them. This is the great mystery surrounding Raphael. He is often present where no one sees him, and no one understood this better than the mystics. In the Middle Ages, a woman named St. Hildegard of Bingen began writing down her visions. A Benedictine abbess, musician, and theologian, she believed angels were not just messengers, but participants in the great symphony of healing and restoration. She wrote about an angel of healing who stood in the gap between breath and sorrow. While she never directly names Raphael in her writings, many believe this was him, because that's where he always seems to stand, between breath and sorrow. And centuries later, another voice would echo that thought: St. Padre Pio, the famous stigmatic priest from Italy, whose miracles and mystical experiences shocked the 20th century, often spoke of angelic guidance. He would remind people to speak to their guardian angels, and many times he'd quietly invoke Raphael when someone came to him with persistent illnesses or emotional torment. In his letters, he once wrote to a suffering soul, "Ask Raphael to accompany you. He is more silent than most, but he does not abandon. Not all encounters were mystical." There's the account of a woman named Mireille, who lived in France during World War II. She had lost her husband to the Nazi invasion, was raising 3 children alone, and was on the brink of collapse. She wasn't a mystic. She was exhausted. One night, unable to sleep, she found herself praying words she hadn't used in years. "If you are there, Raphael, help me." She later described what followed not as a vision, but as a profound and radiant peace. The next day, she felt the energy to rise, to cook, to smile. She said, "It was as if someone took the weight from my back. I didn't see him, but I knew he had passed through." How many others have felt the same? You won't find these stories in history books. They're not footnoted in encyclopedias, but they exist in diaries, letters, and memory, in the secret, intimate folds of human life. And isn't that fitting for Raphael? Unlike the angels who descend with trumpets or fire, he's the one who shows up quietly and leaves only the scent of healing behind, even in dreams. Numerous saints, nuns, and even ordinary people have reported encountering Raphael in dreams. Not terrifying ones, but those that leave you rested. Dreams of being guided down a long path, of being told gently, "You're not broken. You are becoming." One young seminarian in the 1950s wrote in his journal, "I dreamed of a man with bright eyes who pointed me toward the door I was afraid to open. When I awoke, I was no longer afraid." I believe it was Raphael. What do we make of such testimonies? Skeptics will call them coincidence or the projection of the human psyche. But for the faithful, there's something more. They are evidence that God, through his angels, is still present in the spaces between science and silence. And Raphael, in particular, seems to dwell in those spaces where medicine ends and mystery begins. It's not surprising, then, that he's also associated with love. Yes, love. Because healing and love are closer than we think. And Raphael, who guided Tobias to his future wife and helped her find peace from trauma, became over centuries the patron of lovers, marriages, and those seeking companionship. He's the one people pray to when they fear they'll never find love, when they carry wounds from previous relationships, when they hope to start anew, but are afraid to trust again. There's a tenderness in that role, a gentleness. It says, "You are not too damaged to be loved." You can walk into many old churches in Italy or Spain, and you'll find newlyweds lighting candles beneath his statue. Sometimes there's no ceremony, just a quiet glance upward and a whispered thanks. Why Raphael? Because while others may bless the vows or celebrate the joy, he is the one who helped them through the heartbreak, through the loneliness that came before, through the healing that made love possible again. That's the difference. His role isn't just to witness the miracle, but to make it possible. And so, as time passed, Raphael's identity deepened not only as a healer of the body or a comforter of the mind, but as a divine matchmaker of sorts, a bringer of companions, a restorer of hope in connection. In a world where relationships often feel fragile, even disposable, Raphael offers something stronger, the vision of love born from understanding, from shared struggle, from healing. It's this full spectrum, physical, emotional, relational, that makes Raphael so beloved, because he doesn't belong to one class of miracle. He belongs to every ache. He walks with the blind, the heartbroken, the terrified, the weary. He stands at hospital beds, beside therapists, in war trenches, at wedding altars, in darkened rooms where people pray with no words left, and yet he asks for no credit. Remember when his mission was complete in the Book of Tobit, he revealed his identity only at the end, only when the healing was done. And even then, he said not to worship him, but to bless God. That humility, that's rare. Even among the divine, it's part of what makes Raphael unforgettable. Not because he demands devotion, but because he deserves it, not through fear, but through presence. He is, as countless believers have described him, the angel who never leaves. The story of Raphael has always been a paradox. He is the angel you may never see, yet the one you feel most deeply. His presence isn't about spectacle. It's about nearness, quiet, faithful nearness. And it is that very closeness, so intimate and persistent, that has earned him not just reverence, but love. But here's a strange twist in the tale. Raphael is not universally named in all Christian traditions. In fact, the Book of Tobit is considered deuterocanonical, meaning it appears in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles, but is absent from the Protestant canon. So, for millions of believers, Raphael's story was once hidden, yet somehow he still found them. Despite lacking formal scriptural standing in some traditions, Raphael made his way into hearts through art, folklore, hymn, and healing prayers. His name slipped into Protestant circles not as doctrine, but as devotion. Anglican churches began celebrating him. Lutheran communities invoked his intercession, especially during epidemics or personal crises. It was as though Raphael, true to form, didn't wait for an invitation. He simply showed up where he was needed. This, in a way, is part of his theology. He crosses boundaries even outside Christianity. In Islamic tradition, there is the Archangel Raphael, believed to be the one who will blow the trumpet signaling the day of judgment. Though not identical to Raphael, many scholars have drawn parallels. Both are deeply connected to divine intervention, sound, healing, and the end of human suffering. The name Israfel even sounds like a linguistic cousin of Raphael. And beyond the Abrahamic faiths, there are whispers of Raphael's character in stories from all corners of the world, stories of unknown guides, healing strangers, radiant beings who appear in dreams or crises and disappear just as quietly. It's as if the archetype of Raphael is written into the human condition. A collective memory of an unseen helper. Isn't that what we all long for? Not just rescue, but companionship. Not just miracles, but someone who understands. In Eastern Orthodox Christianity, Raphael is revered alongside Michael and Gabriel. Iconography depicts him with a staff and a fish symbols, not just of guidance and healing, but of his grounded, human-like presence. He's not high in the clouds. He's on the road, walking beside us. Monks in Mount Athos, Greece, whisper his name during prayers for the sick. Russian Orthodox liturgy often includes him during intercessory services, especially for the emotionally distressed. And in the ancient Syrian church, the name Raphael means not just God heals, but God restores, a subtle shift, but one that deepens the understanding. Healing isn't just about curing. It's about bringing back what was lost, that restoration can come in many forms. For a father who lost a child and could no longer pray, it came in the form of a sudden moment of calm while watching the sunrise. For a young woman who had been abandoned at the altar, it came in a quiet peace as she knelt before a stained glass image of Raphael. She said she didn't ask for anything, she just sat. And somehow, her heart didn't feel quite as hollow afterward. This is the pattern. Raphael doesn't always fix what's broken, but he brings strength to face it, courage to continue. And sometimes that's the greater miracle. That's why he's invoked during pilgrimages. You'll hear his name murmured in the Camino de Santiago, where weary travelers pray for protection and renewal. His image appears in hospital chapels, stitched onto nurse badges, carried in pockets during chemotherapy sessions. There's even a small shrine to him in Lourdes, France, though it's dedicated to the Virgin Mary. Many come to that sacred spring with Raphael in their hearts, hoping for his intercession too. Because healing is never just a moment. It's a journey, and Raphael is the angel of the journey. Remember the Book of Tobit? The journey of Tobias wasn't just geographical. It was emotional, spiritual, relational. He left home afraid. He returned with vision, love, and wisdom. And Raphael walked beside him the whole way. How many of us are on similar paths? We set out thinking we're after one thing, a cure, a job, a solution, and along the way, we discover deeper truths. We find love, or courage, or faith, or the strength to forgive, and somewhere along that path, perhaps unnoticed, Raphael is walking too. There's a famous legend from the 17th century, a ship caught in a violent storm off the coast of Portugal. As it was about to sink, a sailor cried out not to Christ or Mary, but to Raphael. "Guide us as you did Tobias." He yelled into the roaring wind. The ship, against all odds, made it ashore. The survivors later built a small chapel on the cliffs and named it after the angel who, they believed, had steered them to safety. Whether myth or miracle, the message is the same. When we are lost, when the path is dark, when everything feels too heavy, Raphael arrives. Not as a blinding light, but as a steady hand, and maybe that's what sets him apart. Gabriel delivers messages. Michael brings protection. But Raphael, he stays. He walks at your pace. He listens. He brings healing that doesn't erase the wound, but honors it. He shows that what is broken can still be beautiful. That restoration doesn't always mean going back. It can mean going forward, stronger, wiser, softer. That's why people across the world, across denominations, even across religions, whisper his name. Because in a fragmented world, he embodies unity. In a hurting world, he embodies compassion. And in a fearful world, he brings peace. A man once said, "I do not believe in angels, but if I did, I would imagine them like Raphael, less like warriors, more like friends. That, perhaps, is the greatest tribute of all. There's a special kind of silence that follows healing, not the absence of sound, but the fullness of relief, the quiet after a long cry, the stillness that follows pain. And in that silence, many believe Raphael remains not as a visitor, but as a guardian. Because for those who've experienced his nearness, something lingers, something that never entirely leaves. The story of Raphael doesn't end in the Book of Tobit, nor does it end in shrines or hymns or the pages of hagiographies. It continues every time someone chooses to believe in recovery, in hope, in the chance to start again. That's what makes him so beloved, not because he promises escape from suffering, but because he walks through it with you, and those who have suffered often carry the deepest devotion to him. Take, for example, the story of Father Ramen, a Spanish priest imprisoned during the brutal anti-clerical purges in the early 20th century. Beaten and starved, he was denied access to sacraments, even a Bible. But every day, he said a quiet prayer he'd memorized as a boy, "Saint Raphael, guide my spirit through this darkness." He later wrote that during his loneliest nights, he could feel a presence in his cell, not speaking, but simply being there when he was finally released. He devoted his ministry to helping trauma survivors and always credited Raphael for helping him endure. That's a common thread. People don't just say Raphael helped them heal. They say he stayed with them while they were broken, and that's something rare in our world. We often celebrate those who win, those who overcome. But we don't always honor those who simply keep going. Raphael does. He walks with the chronically ill, the grieving widow, the war veteran with silent wounds. He's the patron of those who may never be cured in the eyes of the world, but who still live, love, believe. His miracles aren't always dramatic. They're sometimes barely visible, like the addict who stays clean for one more day. The woman who finds the courage to leave a violent home, the child with autism who finally speaks a word, the man who opens the curtains again after months in the dark. Are these stories written in stained glass? No, but they are inscribed in lives. Quiet testaments to a presence that heals without demanding credit. There's a passage in the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila where she speaks of an angel who comforts not with words, but with understanding. Many scholars think she was speaking of her guardian angel, but some, especially mystics, believe she was referring to Raphael, because she often invoked him when ministering to the sick. In one of her letters, she described visiting a dying nun and asking for Raphael to be near. There was a sweetness in the room, she wrote, like a light you cannot see, but which warms the soul. Centuries later, Pope Benedict XVI would describe Raphael as the angel of the interior journey, not just a guide for travel or recovery, but for the transformation of the heart. And that's the key. To truly understand Raphael's enduring love, you have to see that healing is not a return to what was, but a movement toward what can be. It's not about reversing the past. It's about renewing the soul. A man named Elias, a hospice chaplain, tells a story about one of his patients, an elderly man named Walter, who had been estranged from his children for decades. Near the end of his life, Walter began having dreams of a man in white robes standing beside his bed, saying nothing, just being near. It gave him courage. He called his daughter. She came. They cried together. She forgave him. He died the next morning with her hand in his. Elias, who had heard of Raphael but never paid him much attention, began to wonder. He started reading more, praying more. Eventually, he kept a small image of Raphael in his coat pocket during every visit. Not for them, he said, for me. To remind me that we're never alone. Raphael doesn't demand belief. He invites trust. He doesn't guarantee a cure. He walks with you, no matter the outcome. And maybe that's why his love feels more human than most divine figures. Because he understands time, struggle, patience, long journeys. He understands that healing isn't always clean or linear. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it hurts more before it helps, but he remains. There are people who wear medals with his image not because they expect protection, but because they've already received it. In a moment of despair, in an unexplained peace, in the slow, silent rebuilding of a shattered life, some carry those medals into operating rooms, others keep them under pillows in cancer wards, some bury them with loved ones, believing Raphael will guide their soul home. It's a quiet love, but a fierce one. And it crosses boundaries between life and death, between hope and fear, between despair and dawn. There's a Jewish proverb that says, God counts the tares of women, and perhaps Raphael is the one who gathers them. Not just to return them, but to transform them into strength, into clarity, into a story worth telling. The poet Khalil Gibran once wrote, "The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain." That could be the mission of Raphael, to help us hold both, sorrow and joy, pain and purpose, weakness and wisdom. And maybe that's why his name, God Heals, isn't past tense. It's present. It's happening now, right here, in this very breath you're taking. If you listen carefully in the quiet hours of the night, you might catch it, that gentle hum just beneath your heartbeat, that subtle reminder you are not and never have been alone. Raphael is near, not just the angel of healing, but the soul who walks beside the shattered, the silent, the searching. His love does not demand attention. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or thunder. It arrives softly, like the hush before the dawn, like a hand resting on your back as you weep, like the breath that steadies you before you stand again, and it endures. Over centuries, through wars and peace, across continents and cultures, his image has changed, sometimes young, sometimes wise, sometimes radiant, sometimes almost ordinary. But his essence remains the same. God heals, not just the body, the soul, to life, the world. The stories span far and wide. In 19th century Italy, there was a woman named Lucia who suffered from seizures. Doctors could do little. But each time she had one, her mother would light a candle to Raphael. Over time, the seizures stopped, not overnight, but gradually. When Lucia married, she gave her first child the middle name Raphaela, not because she knew what had healed her, but because something within her knew who had walked with her. In Ethiopia, the Orthodox Church celebrates Raphael with such devotion that there are entire cities, Raphaelite sanctuaries built on islands, reached only by boat. Pilgrims journey there barefoot, believing that touching the soil blesses their steps. Some stay for weeks. They do not always return cured, but they return different, lighter, held. In the Philippines, during annual healing masses, people gather under open skies to pray for miracles. They sing Raphael's name aloud. Some bring photos of their loved ones. Others bring nothing but hope. One man said, "We pray not because we expect him to change God's mind, but because we know he helps us carry the answer. That is Raphael. He doesn't make the road shorter. He makes it bearable. He doesn't promise the ending you want. He strengthens you to meet the one you're given. In so many ways, he is the most human of angels. Not in weakness, but in earnest. His love does not float above suffering. It kneels beside it. It meets you in the waiting room, in the sleepless night, in the long hallway of a hospital at a.m. It meets you in guilt, in grief, in the half-whispered prayers that feel too small to matter. But they do matter. To him, there is a saying from the Talmud, "Every blade of grass has its angel bending over it, whispering, 'Grow, grow.' If that is true, then Raphael is whispering not just to the earth, but to you, 'Heal, rise, begin again,' because that is the quiet miracle. Not always the cure, but the courage to try, and those miracles. They're everywhere ... in the nurse who holds your hand. In the stranger who pays your bill ... in the letter you didn't expect ... in the memory that returns to you when you need it most. These are not accidents. Raphael moves through others too. He is not always visible, but he is always there. In kindness, in endurance, in every act of compassion. Some people never know his name, but they feel his work. In the moments that should have broken them, but didn't. In the wounds that still hurt, but no longer define them. His love is not conditional. It is covenantal, not if you're good enough, just because you are created to be whole, because God's mercy flows through healing like sunlight through stained glass, bending, coloring, illuminating even the darkest rooms. That's why Raphael is loved, because he's not an angel who comes to test or judge. He comes to tend, to sit beside your suffering and make it sacred, to turn wounds into wisdom, to turn silence into prayer. He is the angel of second chances, long recoveries, quiet victories. He is the one who understands what it means to be human. To carry sorrow. To hope again anyway. So if you are tired, broken, lost, if you are afraid, uncertain, unraveling, listen. You may not see him, but he is near, in the pause, in the breath, in the love that still finds you. And if you have healed, if you have crossed the storm and touched dry land, remember that love is yours to carry forward, to extend to others, to become for someone else what Raphael was for you. Not the answer, but the presence, not the miracle, but the companion. And that, perhaps, is the greatest healing of all. There is something eternal in the love of Raphael, not because he shouts from mountaintops or wages war in heaven, but because he walks the earth where it hurts the most, because he listens where few do, because he stays where others leave. We have followed his steps through ancient scriptures, through art and story, across nations and centuries. We've seen him lift the blind, guard the traveler, and cradle the brokenhearted. And in each of those stories, one truth has remained: healing, the kind that matters most, is never just about the body. It's about becoming whole. That is Raphael's gift. His love teaches us that restoration takes time, that compassion is divine, that no suffering is too small for heaven to notice. He invites us not to escape pain, but to find purpose through it. And whether we call him saint, angel, or mystery, his touch endures. So as we close tonight, hold this truth close. Healing isn't a miracle that happens once. It's a presence that walks beside you every step, a sacred friendship you may not always feel, but will never lose. And if you ever find yourself in the dark, uncertain where to go or how to begin again, whisper his name. Raphael, the angel who never left, the one who walks with you still.